You are audible.
Okay.
Kalpesh, let me introduce you first.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
so good afternoon, all of you. After post-lunch session, day three, second session. Uh, the topic for this session is study of various artificial intelligence models for diagnosis, prognosis, and the treatment. Uh, our expert name is Mr. Kalpesh Patil. He is a lead data scientist in Biosense Technology, Mumbai. Kalpesh has
Sir,
experience.
your voice is too low. Is it possible to make it little loud?
Hello, am I audible now? Am I audible
Yes,
now?
sir. Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Kalpesh Patil has expertise in computer vision, image processing, and pattern recognition for medical image analysis. Well versed with machine learning algorithm implementation on mobile devices comprising Android and iOS operating system. He has experience with the Actofit wearables also for the more than 3 years, and he is now currently working as a lead data scientist in Biosense Technologies Private Limited. He possesses a master degree from Indian Institute of Technology, BHU Varanasi. Without wasting time, I will welcome Mr. Kalpesh Patil and ask him to start this session. Kalpesh, please, you can start your session.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm audible to all of you. So today's session is AI models in healthcare for diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment. So we'll be looking like what are the techniques, computer vision techniques and machine learning technique used in the diagnosis application as well as for the prognosis and treatment. Before going ahead, would like to know what are the differences between diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment, and in which cases we'll use which kind of models. So diagnosis is something where we want to identify the illness. So and prognosis where we inform patients about risk of developing the disease or illness or estimating the survival time with the help of knowledge gained from various diagnostic reports. And in treatment, we estimate effect on individual patients uh, of that specific treatment and evaluate the quality of the estimation. So let's see what are the different clinical examples of those. Hello. Yeah. So diagnosis, the tumor detection from the brain MR images, arrhythmia detection from the ECG reports, or abnormality detection in digital pathology. These are the examples of the medical diagnosis. Prognosis, the estimating the 10 years cardiology risk of an individual, forecasting the risk of lung cancer, recurrence after the therapy. And in treatment, estimating the treatment effect of particular drug combination on colon cancer. These are some of the examples of the diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment tasks. We'll see one by one. To begin with the diagnosis with the AI models, we would like to give you a rough idea about different techniques used in artificial intelligence. Two broad categories are the machine learning and a deep learning. So in machine learning, for that, this example will give you a better idea. This is the medical diagnosis of an arrhythmia detection with the help of ECG sensor. So here we get the ECG report, and once ECG signal is captured from the ECG sensor, we have to go through the signal denoising, as lots of noise will be present once captured through the sensor. We may apply various bandpass filter, maybe wavelet denoising, and once we get the clean ECG signal, we apply time domain and a frequency domain and a wavelet domain feature extraction, and certain features has been extracted, and those features, extracted features, are used to train the machine learning model. Here, the feature extraction process is done by the machine learning engineer, where he extract the features from the signal, and use a development model which will be further loaded onto the raw data for the prediction purpose. There's another example where a whole slide image is captured from the WSI system. WSI system is something like automated microscope where the 40x magnification images are captured, and those images are stitched together to form a very high resolution image, which normally varies in between size of 5 to 10 GBs. So those very high resolution images are stitched together and uploaded onto the cloud, where the expert pathologists can annotate them. What they do is they screen a certain section from the slide and they annotate. Annotate is like drawing a boundary around a specific region of abnormality and label them. Okay, this is the presence of particular tumor, or this is the certain kind of infection. So once the boundaries are being drawn and labeled by the pathologist, we create a mask for those annotation label, and using those masks we train the deep learning model, and that deep learning model will be saved, and next time when the fresh WSI image is captured with the device, so the technician can select the hotspot region, or normally it is being observed with the 4x magnification. So in WSI system, you can view the image from a 1x magnification up to the highest magnification. In this case, it is a 40x. So normally they observe up to on a 4x magnification, they get the idea of the hotspot region, and from that hotspot region, they select an area where automatically images are patched, and it has been provided to the inference engine, where inference engine will give you a prediction of along with the segmentation region and the whatever the probability of having a tumor or not on those specific segmented region. So in such an approach, we prefer deep learning algorithms. So we'll look further, like here you'll get just an overview of what kind of application it is, but how to use these techniques we'll see further. So in context with the deep learning, in today's session, we'll mainly focus into the computer vision aspect of it. So specifically for the image recognition part, identifying the object from that specific image, objects, image segmentation, and this related to the image processing task, we'll using certain models or techniques. So here you can see the deep learning is a part of machine learning, and convolutional neural network is a very important aspect of the deep learning, which has been used for the image identification, then object detection, localization, and segmentation. So we can have basic kind of categorization of the image processing techniques depending on the task we have. Simple from the image classification, where you have a certain set of image and you want to just classify whether certain object is present in that image or not. You are not concerned about the location of that specific object. Another application is object detection, where you wanted to know along with the class of presence of that specific class in that image, you want to identify whether exact location of that object into the image, but you're not bothered about the boundary of that particular object. So this is the problem of object detection. In the semantic segmentation, what we do is we identify the boundaries of the object, but if in case the two objects of the same class are overlapped on each other, this method cannot distinguish between the different instances of the same object. If there have been other object like along with the person, there may be an animal or something, and if they are being overlap, in that case semantic segmentation could have drawn two different segments. But as of the same class, multiple instances are there which are overlapped on each other, it couldn't differentiate. So another technique to eliminate this drawback is instance segmentation, and where the multiple instances of the same class can be differentiated and along with the boundary of them. So we'll start with the medical image analysis, keeping in mind this is an example of the image classification, and where we have three different set of images. This is a normal image, then bacterial with pneumonia, and with one with the viral pneumonia. In my slides, I have provided the reference link. Hello. Yeah. Hello.
Yes, Alpesh, you can.
Okay, sorry. I guess someone has asked something. So here, this is an example of the image classification for the medical imaging, where this is an X-ray, different set of X-ray images, and we need to create an image classifier which will distinguish between the three categories of the images. Similarly, for the object detection, these are the images of the peripheral blood smear, where slide taking a blood sample along with the stains, we create an smear on the slide where it has been observed under the microscopes, and this image is captured. This image is captured under the 40x magnification, and our task is to identify the RBCs, WBCs, and platelets in that particular image. So this is a scenario where we can use the object detection, where I am not concerned about the boundary detection of the RBCs, but just concerned about the counts. Like I'm interested into the RBC count, WBC count, and a platelet count. So in such a scenario, I am not interested into the exact dimensions of the elements like RBC, WBC, platelets, but just a count where. So in such a cases, I will go with the object detection technique. Another is a semantic segmentation. So in a brain-tumor detection and semantic segmentation, where you know that there are not any overlap regions, or same kind of regions are not overlapped on each other. In such a cases, you can go with the semantic segmentation. So this is the case where you just want to identify the presence of a tumor. So here I can use the semantic segmentation technique. This is an example of lung section from the histopathology image. So here, what I'm interested is the nuclear segmentation. So here you can see the nuclei are overlapped on each other. So if you go with the semantic segmentation, there are two possibilities. Either two overlap cells will be you could differentiate between two different cells, but actual boundaries won't be derived, as you will apply certain threshold in such a way that these two individual cells will be distinct to each other, but their actual boundary information will be lost. Other ways if you those overlap segment can be formed together to form a single segment. So instead of identifying two different cells, you might observe in your final prediction there is only a single cell, because that overlap cells won't be differentiated, and instead of two overlap cells you can see a single cell, which is actually a wrong interpretation. So in such a cases, you will prefer using instance segmentation, where you can see the overlap cells are also differentiable. So I have provided the reference links below the images. So once done with the presentation, I will provide my PPT, so you can go through those reference links and investigate further, like what exactly that project is and what techniques or models are used for the same. This is an oral application scenario where I have the pathology image, and I will have a certain section which is the 40x magnification section, where pathologist will create a ground truth. So here you can say ground truth is basically the annotation. So where you draw the boundary around the different regions and provide a label to them. So their different color represents the different labels, and this ground truth is used to generate the different masks, and along with this ground truth and the mask, we generate an CNN model which will further do automatic segmentation. And once the WSI image is generated and you want to now do the prediction over it, you can have certain section of the slide and zoom it. You have to zoom it to the 40x magnification, and on those 40x magnification, this inference model will predict and provide you a segmentation. So this is the actual training process, and this is and once training has been done, you can do the prediction over the same. So in this, you will get an timing, you get a rough idea like what are the different applications and how these images are being captured. Then what are the role of the, here in case the annotator, or here the annotator is a pathologist, where because he in this case you need some kind of annotator requires some kind of expertise, that you should know, you should differentiate between different cell types, different regions, and so that he can provide you very good data. So the annotation process is very critical because everything is all about your data. The quality of data will estimate the quality of prediction. So lots of time is being given to the collection of data. You can say roughly 50% or more time is provided to the data collection, annotation process, and the model development and model optimization and model evaluation and further correction into the model takes remaining 50%. So major chunk of time is provided to the data collection, because if your data is good, then only you can provide a good model with a good prediction. So this is the that's why I included this slide, to get you the understanding of or role of the ground truth generation or the annotation. So let's see how CNN works for the image classification. So normally image classification is a first or very simple uh, technique or simple application of the CNN compared to the object detection or a semantic segmentation or a instance segmentation. So here you have a input image, and you use certain set of layers like a convolution layer, railing function, pulling function, then repeat the same process, then apply the fully connected layer, and then having a softness function to give you a final output of whether that particular image belong to a particular class or not. So here you will have an idea like what are the different blocks means, where we from the input image we apply certain filters or kernels, you can say. So those filters or those kernel will derive in a feature map, and those feature map will give you, like in initial layer you'll get a very basic features like age detections and corners, and in subsequent on the deeper layer you'll get more complex features like the shape information, textures, and all. So timing, I think you won't be getting anything like this something, it will look like a black box to you, but we'll in next subsequent slides we'll learn about uh, those boxes, like what do you mean by convolution operation, what is ReLU and a pooling, and what's the role of those layer into the image classification. And once we understand those basic fundamental blocks, we can understand the different model architecture. As these blocks are more or less common in each model architecture. So if we understand those model, if you to understand any model, or if you search on the search any computer vision related paper and want to understand the model architecture, for example, understanding the unit. So to understand that, you first have to understand the basic fundamental blocks. So once you understand that blocks, so you can arrange into a specific sequence, and then you can try out yourself using either the TensorFlow or a PyTorch, and and do and check whether that particular model is good enough to give you your desired output or not. So this is the if you visualize the CNN of to the different layers, what you will get is something like this. In the very initial layers, you get very simple features like edges, or you can say corners and all. In subsequent features, you get some basic shapes. You start getting some texture information, and in a much deeper layer, you'll get some. You start getting some complex features like actual shape. So how this is happening into the CNN, we'll try to see. This is the example of the brain MRI image, where a certain section from the input image has been applied with the filter. At one particular instant, there will be a certain field or a section from input image is used to derive the feature map. So that certain section is known as a receptive field. So for example, if you are using a kernel of a 3x3, in that case, your receptive field will be a 3x3. If you use a kernel by 5x5, so in that case, your receptive field will vary. So after applying the kernel over the receptive field, you get a feature map, and those from feature maps you apply the pooling window, where the feature map is reduced into the dimension. There is a multiple advantage of doing that. We'll see that in the next slides why we use a pooling window and how feature maps are generated in the convolution operation. So once those feature maps are generated to the next subsequent layers, followed by the pooling layers, so we create and vectorize feature maps, which is a flattened layer, which is further given to the fully convolution layer, which is the something similar to the what we do in the classic ANN, which will further given to the softmax function, and that softmax will provide you an output belonging to a specific class, or maybe this in this case whether it's a tumor or non-tumor. So we'll see some of the basic concepts of the CNN. It includes convolution layer, pooling layer, fully connected layer, dense layer, region proposal network, skip connections, and identity block. So we won't be going into the maths of everything, but I will give you an overview or superficial idea about like what happens behind each particular layer. Later on, you can explore the maths behind it. I will provide the reference links and related IPython notebooks to you so that you can go through it. This is a convolution operation. This is an example where you, over the input data, you apply the kernel and you get the convoluted feature. So I start with the 111, 011, and 001. Then with the stride 1, I can have next receptive field, that is a 110, 111, and 011. And after stride 2, after the third operation, I will have a receptive field of 100, 110, and a 111. And when I will do convolution operation with this my kernel, I will get output as an 4. So this is how convolution operation happens in terms of CNN. So this same thing I can do in a sequence. Like once I apply the convolution operation, then generating a feature map, and again on the same feature map, I can have a further convolution operation. So with every convolution operation, the dimension of your feature will be reduced. So this is the simulation of how convolution is applied over all three channels. So here on your all the red, let's say you have image, color image, where you have RGB are the three different channels. So this convolution operation can be performed on over all the channels, and you can get the feature maps. Also with the convolution operation, you have seen convolution is actually normally followed by the ReLU. So ReLU is the activation function, and why ReLU activation function is used here, you can see on the input image we apply the convolution layer or the feature map, and on the feature map we apply the ReLU activation function, that is a rectifier. The graph of the ReLU activation function look like this, so that so how this rectification happens, you will get an idea from this slide, that applying the once you apply the convolution over the input image, you get the feature detector output. This is the output of the feature detector, and when you apply the ReLU over those feature detected output, you will get a rectified image. So the ReLU helps you to, as you can see, you can able to get a sense of the very basic features like the edges and the corners here, and it removes all the black elements from the image and only carrying the positive value. So the advantage of doing this is the computation time will be reduced, and after we rectify the image, we'll find the color changing more abruptly. That is, the nonlinearity will be eliminated. So after applying the ReLU, we apply the pooling layer. So pooling layer is used to reduce the dimension of the feature map and the number of so that number of parameters to learn and the computation time required to train the CNN will be reduced. It also summarizes the feature present in the that specific region of the feature map, and we can precisely position the features generated by the convolution layer. So this is how the pooling layer has been applied. There are different techniques for the pooling, which is actually a downsampling technique, where the max pooling is used. So you can see this is a feature map, and we use a downsampling. So most of the information of the image are retained. Also, you get an advantage that dimension of the image is reduced by retaining the information in it. So here you can see how the max pooling is applied. Like in a single depth slides, you have if you apply the max pooling, so from the 1156, the max value is 6. From 2478, it is 8. From 3212, it is 3, and from 1034, this is 4. So after you apply the pooling layer, which is actually a max pooling, then you provide that to the fully connected layer. So that fully connected layer is basically is responsible to give you about information about the class probabilities. Like probability of having a specific class into the image will be derived with the help of fully connected layer. So those fully connected layer will be further connected to the softmax function. So eventually softmax function will give you an class output. So we'll see how the fully connected layer is responsible for image classification. So what we do is the output of convolution or pooling is flattened into a single vector. So this single vector, if is given to the fully convolution layer, where each representing a probability that a certain feature belonging to a label or not. For example, if the image is of a coal, in this case, feature representing the things like whisker or fur should have a high probability for the label coal. And also the fully connected part of the CNN network goes through its own back propagation uh, to derive the appropriate weights, and each neuron receives the weights that prioritize the most appropriate label. And finally, the by the voting method, we identify the class of uh, that particular image. So those once we identify the probabilities of those particular classes, then it is given to the softmax layer, and softmax layers will give you a final output. So softmax function looks like this. So where each value ranges from 0 to 1, and the sum of the value will always get as a 1. The highest value has a high probability, and normally it is used under multi-class classification, where you want to have a multiple possibility of classes and want to find only single class out of all the possible classes. So this is the way we apply the softmax function after the fully connected layer, and you get the probabilities. And for example, in this case, we like uh, after the forward propagation, we apply the softmax function. So we'll get the probability of the every class. Like here, the output will be cat. Similarly, okay, so similarly in this example, the possibilities of having a green will be an higher. So it's okay if you can't get uh, any technicality behind it, but just and try to understand that softmax is just a layer which finally, as you derive all the class probabilities, and now you want to generate a final output from those generated class probabilities, you apply the softmax function. So once you get a sense about all those concepts, then you can start uh, reading the different model architecture. Let's take an example of the UNet model. UNet is mainly used in the medical image segmentation. Before UNet, we mainly the image classification uh, models were developed. So in UNet, we are not only interested, we are not interested only on the identification of the presence of specific or just image classification, but we are also interested into the boundary detection, like actual localization of the object and identifying the boundary of the object, which is ideal scenario in case of medical image processing, where you want to identify the location of the tumor and the you identify or do the segmentation for the boundary detection of that specific tumor. So how it is done? This is a UNet architecture. In UNet architecture, you apply the convolution layers. Then convolution, as we already seen that as you apply the convolution layer, feature maps, and pooling layer, you start getting the from the very low level feature, you start getting the very high level features, and dimension of your feature mass is being reduced. And as your dimension is being reduced, it's very difficult for you to locate the position of that specific object into the image. And to overcome that, we do the upsampling. Here, upsampling followed by the convolution operation, that is a downsampling, and the one flattened layer, which is why this is given a name as a U-Net, because architecture looks like a U shape where you apply the downsampling. So downsampling is something similar to the what you have seen in the image classification, where you have some set of convolution layered ReLU followed by the max pooling, and followed by the flat layer. Then again you start doing upsampling. So let's see how upsampling has been done in the U-Net to derive the spatial information or the position of the object in that specific image. So this is how we apply the convolution along with the ReLU, and with an upsampling is being where you have the feature, let's say of the 3 by 3, or you can say 3 by 3, and from then 3 by 3 you want to create an very higher dimension information. So this is an example where you have an input is like a 0, 1, 2, 3. So you apply the kernel. This is a kernel for the upsampling, where you apply that kernel on the each specific value of the input. So here first you'll get here we use a transpose convolution. So in transpose convolution, in you apply like 0, 0, 0, 1, then in a 1, if we multiply it to the input 1 to the my kernel 0, 1, 2, 3. Similarly, I can have if I multiply my kernel to the input 2, I will have a 0, 2, 4, 6. And if I multiply my kernel with input 3, I will output 0, 3, 6, 9. So all those individual operations are clubbed together to form the final output, and my final output is the 3 by 3. So from the 2 by 2 input, we have derived the 3 by 3, which so that is the upsampling. So here by doing this, we try to locate the object of those specific try to locate the specific object into the in context to the entire image, not only in context to the feature map, because feature map will give you an idea about if about the possibility or presence of specific class or not. But to get the location information, you have to again try to upsample, so that the actual position of those specific feature into the image can be derived. So this is so once you get in sense like how upsampling is done, you can try out the U-Net by yourself. I will provide you some reference IPython notebooks where you can get some kind of data set, maybe the MRI data set, and from the MRI data set you can apply different layers and the operations with the TensorFlow as well as with the PyTorch, so that what are the after applying the subsequent layers and following the uh, uh, downsampling by the flattened layer, and then again the upsampling, how you can able to generate the segmentation. So you'll get the hands-on experience on the same. These are the broad concepts that you should understand. Obviously, you won't able to get each and everything right now. The idea is you should get familiar with the terminologies so that you can at least get an idea like what are the different part of that particular model architecture, and later on you can actually try out them by coding yourself. So along with the UNet, there's another state-of-the-art model, that is a ResNet. It is very important into the computer vision domain because it introduced very important fundament element, that is the skip connections. So what are the skip connections? What happens with every convolution layer, the dimension of the image has been reduced. So dimension of the feature map has been reduced, and with the reduced dimension, if you apply the gradient in the back propagation, the gradient value will be very what you can say, it's a very insignificant. So as your layer becomes, or as your model becomes very deep means number of hidden layers are very large. With addition of each hidden layer, the model start losing its gradient information. So to overcome that this scenario, the ResNet introduced the skip connections, where not only from a one specific previously we could have only transfer information from one layer to another layer, that is a feed forward, but actually we can skip the connections from one specific layer to the another layer directly. So this is it might look a very simple thing for you, but it was first introduced by the ResNet model into the architecture, and that's given a really great results. So this is important because in many the state of the model you find nowadays consisting of the mask Gaussian and or res unit, which is a combination of ResNet and UNet. So in a UNet you don't have skip connections, but actually you can use ResNet block along with the UNet to form a res unit. So you can search for the different papers related to that. There's a really great research has been happened with where the different concept from one specific model has been taken and used in combination with another model to get a great result. So that here this skip connection can be added into the UNet model, so that you can rename it as a res unit, and it will give you an advantage of the skip connection into the ResNet, as well as the advantage of upsampling and a downsampling architecture of the UNet to derive the spatial information. So there's another info technique that is known as a region proposal network. So region proposal network was first introduced into the faster RCNN. So faster RCNN is a model architecture mainly used for the object detection. Here I have covered only the important fundamentals which are normally used in all the state-of-the-art computer vision model existing currently. So which this is again the very big revolution, where the region proposal networks were separate uh, uh, we apply the separate network over the feature map to generate the bounding boxes, and those bounding boxes can be adjusted with the help of regression laws to, so that you will get different anchor sizes. Like anchor sizes is something like for example, in case of RBC, WBC, and platelets. So you know that RBC has a different size and a WBC compared to WBC and platelets. So as you know, the in your annotation, the bounding box size of the RBC is different compared to the bounding box size to the platelet and the WBC. So region proposal network use this information and to generate and various sizes of the anchor boxes, so that your classification, so that your object detection accuracy can be improved. Another important model is a mask CNN, which is used for the instance segmentation. So here till now you have covered how image classification, like you can straight away use a ResNet directly for the image classification. Then you can use UNet for the semantic segmentation. For the object detection, you can for the object detection, you can use various models right from the something like YOLO or a faster CNN. But in all those models, the fundamental blocks will remain same. That is a convolution, the ReLU, then pooling, up, then the up convolution, or you can say transpose convolution, followed by the flattening layer, then fully connected layer, and a softmax function. So in instance segmentation, along with the region proposal network, which is in faster CNN, we use fully connected layer to generate the mask head. So here we, along with the object, so along with the object detection, so boundary of the object is detected with help of the mask head. So in instance segmentation, you can say it's a combination of the faster CNN plus a mask head, which is actually set of certain convolution operations and the fully connected layers. So we'll see how, as we already seen the different models like ResNet, then the UNet. So let's say we'll have a scenario where we don't have lots of data set. Ideally, in a deep learning context, you need lots of data set. But in some cases, I will be having very few data set. We'll take an same example of the RBC, WBC in a platelet detection, where I have, let's say, 100 images or I have only the 100 images comprising RBCs, WBCs, and platelets. And actually 100 will be very less, but maybe in between 100 to 1000 images only. So ideally deep learning model won't work good. You need images maybe 10,000 or more than that to have a really good prediction. But if you have, when you have a very limited data set, you can use technique called the transfer learning. That will give you two advantage. That is, uh, as the state of the model, like the Inception or a VGGNet or a ResNet, are already developed and trained on a very huge data, you know, very terabytes, on thousands of terabytes data. Those models are trained by the Google, Facebooks, and Microsoft. So we can use the certain information from those trained model, or you can say we can directly use some the weights derived from those trained model directly into our model, and can use directly use some subsequent layer where only the different information or information in context with our application will be used. So it is as good as copying the feature max from the already trained model into your own uh, model, and add some additional layer on top of that, and generate an custom model. So how it has been done, there are basically two strategies of doing it, where we can directly use the train weights from the first layer and add the dense layers after that. Our dense layers are, that is your uh, fully connected layers. And another is the where I can use I can initialize those weights from those already trained models like Inception or a VGG19 or a ResNet, and I can retrain my model from the scratch, uh, keeping my learning rate very small. Here, this process second strategy is not that frequently used, because here you have to be very cautious so that your model won't be irregularized. So it should have a good prediction on the. I should generalize well, basically. So to have a good generalization, your weight optimization should be appropriate. So to avoid that risk, we keep learning rate very small, and we implement something called early stopping, where we check whether your model performance is degrading or not. So while model is training, we parallelly we check whether your on a validation test your model performance is further improving or it is degrading. If your model performance is not improving with the each epoch, you stop the model learning at that instant itself, and that is called something called early stopping. So early stopping can be applied in such cases. So once you have lots of data, and or over that data, let's say you apply the transfer learning, and after the transfer learning, you have to optimize the weight. So the identification of appropriate weights is very important, and for that purpose, there are two important things that you have to consider. That is the loss function and the optimizers. So in a broad overview, your loss function is something where you have your output result or expected result, and result generated by the subsequent epoch, where you uh, derive the difference between your expected output and the present output. If loss is high, the uh, our duty is to reduce the loss. So it is like identifying the weights combination for which you get the loss value as a minimum. So selection of the loss function is very critical, and it varies depend your application to application. For example, if you want to do boundary detection, something like in the segmentation, you select loss function like a dice loss. If you are only into the image classification, then you normally use cross entropy as a loss function. If you have only two possible classes, use a binary cross entropy. If you have multiple classes, you have a categorical cross entropy. So I will provide the reference link where you can have idea about the different loss functions used in a different medical imaging applications, and you can take a call depending on your image which kind of loss function you use. So in case of, let's say, example of the peripheral blood smear, where you have RBCs are very densely located. So whenever there is very densely located object, we use focal loss. So focal loss works well in case of dense when there's a dense objects are present in your input image. So again, selection of the loss function and the is a different research topic itself, and it varies depending upon your application and and whether you want to do object detection, or you want to go with the segmentation, or you just want to do image classification. So these are the various loss functions for use for a medical image segmentation. I have provided there's a really good Medium article on it, depending on your application, which loss function you should use. That this you can use for the as a good guideline uh, for using a loss function in your own custom model. Along with the loss functions, the optimizers are also plays a very important role. So where we try to identify the combination of your the weights and the where you'll get the minimum loss. So where we actually try to identify the value of the loss function or the minimum value of the loss function, and not only identifying the minimum value loss function, but how many epochs you take to achieve the same. So that is something will be done by the optimizers. Various optimizers are used, mainly the stochastic gradient with the SGD with the momentum, and the ADAM and the RMS prop. These are the very frequently used optimizers. So based on your requirement, whether you want to reach the loss value faster, or Adam will want SGD normally with momentum will give you a better accuracy compared to Adam, but Adam uh, will accelerate uh, the identification of minimum loss value. So in most of the cases, you will find Adam function will be used. So again, I will provide some links and the some Python notebooks where you can use various, you can try out various optimizers and get sense how those optimizers are affecting your model training and model accuracy. So these are the all techniques we use for the medical diagnosis. Now we'll move towards the prognosis, like what kind of models we use for the prognosis purpose. So as I have already stated in start of my slide, that prognosis is something where we try to estimate the survival time for the specific illness, and for that there are the certain matrices that we use, that is life expectancy, then the survivability, the progression of that particular disease, as well as the treatment sensitivity. So along in a prognosis, we use whatever the information we get from the diagnostic model will be used as an input, along with the additional information, or that is the personal information of something like age, gender, the way, height, weight of that particular patient, some environmental data like whether that patient is doing exercise or not, or smoking or not, or whether he is addicted to drinking or not. So, and the disease data derived from the diagnostic model. Along with that, if there are any additional conditions like whether that particular patient has an diabetes or not, or any medical history or not. So all the information is combined together uh, to estimate the risk of specific illness. So here, what the information we have is in form of it's a very, it's data set we normally have in a prognosis is very structural data. Here we'll see one example where how the prognosis now we'll see one example of the prognosis model with the decision trees. Uh, the prognosis examples are again the guiding treatment, the similar risk of heart attack, and maybe we should get drug or reduce to risk. Then mortality risk, estimating 6 or less month mortality risk, we should receive end of life care, or estimating the 10-year cardiovascular risk of an individual, and or forecasting the risk of lung cancer recurrence after the therapy. So model approach is like that. We collect the different set of data, like the diagnostic information, then the personal information, then environmental and some additional information, and we uh, put it into a very structured format. And into that we can have the ANN, or you can use different machine learning models. Uh, Decision trees can be used, Ansible learning or naive Bayes. These are different machine learning models which works really well on your structured data set, are being used further. So let's have an example of prognosis. This is, let's say, a case where a 70-year-old male diagnosed with the arterial fibrillation as a hypertension and diabetes. This information you have. So on the basis of the information, we create and structure data set. So what information I can have is this is also called as a Charles score based on the initials of the features we have. So here, as I have provided here, in case the patient is a 70-year-old, so age between 65 to 70 year will have value 1. He has a diabetes, so diabetes will value have 1. As he already has hypertension, hypertension will 1, and we can derive the final score. So we estimate the score based on the different conditions, and here in the case of prognosis, we use different kind of matrices to evaluate the result of your prognosis model. This matrix is known as a concordant index, where, let's say, an example, you have three patients, like a patient A, patient B, and a patient C, and you have different set of information about the patient A. Hello?
Sir, how we can define the coefficient?
How we can
Define this coefficient.
Okay, this coefficient is basically in this context, you need to have a certain expertise about that specific domain. So this is example where I know in case of hypertension, age is a very significant factor compared to other factors. So this is very subjective here, where you should have certain input from the domain expert has been considered. So here the coefficients are totally taken in context with the expert. So this coefficient may have a different value depending on to the data set you have and the subjects or you can say experts used to generate those kind of coefficient. For example, here experts will be the cardiologist. So what we normally do is we provide different set of features, and the cardiologist will this cardiologist will give you the importance of all the different features. This is just an example. Don't just directly on the coefficient values. So here in some cases your coefficient values can have a different value. So this is just to demonstrate how score can be calculated. The coefficient value is totally depend on how your data has been generated and who have generated that data set.
Okay.
So, okay, so what I was telling that, let's say I have three different patients, like a patient A and a patient B and patient C. So in estimating the prognosis model, what we see is not the actual score, but relative position or a ranking of that specific score. For example, you have a patient A, patient B, and a patient C. And in actually, the patient A has a high higher risk compared to the patient B, and patient C has a higher risk compared to the patient B. So in such a case, if your prognosis model will give you exactly the same output, so your C index score will be in higher. Or but if your actual ranking is different than that of your ranking from your prognosing result, your C index score will be lesser. So how we calculate it, we'll see in the next subsequent slides. So this is a patient A and a patient B, and we want to estimate whether that patient will die within 10 years. So actual case is if that patient uh, uh, risk of particular patient A and a patient B are matches with the our actual information. So in that case, it is concordant. So here you can say that a patient with a worse outcome has a higher risk score, and a patient with the worst outcome here is a patient A does not have a high risk score, then the pair is called non-concordant. So this is the example of the non-concordant. Whenever pair is a concordant, we call it a permissible pairs, and we only consider permissible pairs uh, to calculate the concordance score. So we'll see what happens whenever there is a non-permissible pair, or whenever there is a ties in outcome. So in then ties in outcome will be considered as an non-permissible pair. And again, if there is a there's a tie in a risk, then it will be given a same score, that let's say 0.5 and a 0.5. This is an example where you get an idea, like the patient A, where your event is patient A, patient B, and patient C. So where you have a permissible pairs, and from those permissible pairs you have the concordant pairs, and from and you have a risk one risk type between C and E. So in that case, you can generate the C index as a 4 plus 0.5 into 1, that is a 6. We'll see one example of certain data set. We'll take certain data set. We do some cleaning over the data set, and we'll derive the C score, so that you will get an idea like how this matrices has been used to evaluate the model. There's a different model can be used on this structured data set. Uh, 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 Here we'll take an example of the decision tree, how we can use decision tree to uh, to evaluate the uh, to generate a prognosis score and evaluate that specific score. So predicting the 10-year risk of a death of an individual from the NHNES epidemiology data set. That's the data set we have taken for the example, where we'll be doing data loading and exploring, then we'll do some data cleaning, we'll use decision trees, then we'll evaluate uh, the model with the C index, and we'll do some hyperparameter tuning. So let me share. Let me just wait a minute.
Hello.
Hello, just give me a minute. I'm just changing the screen. Okay. This is a IPython notebook. So I will explain you the step by step, like how different tools are used and how data is loaded, and how we train and model, and how we uh, validate the model with the help of score. So various libraries are imported here. Then again, as I have uploaded my data onto my Google Drive, so I have mounted my drive in this IPython notebook. This is a Google Colab notebook. I will share this Google Colab with you so that you guys can also can have a hands-on on this. So we can start with the data loading. So if I okay, if I explore my data, so you can get an idea like what are the different features present in the data set. So in this data set, the features we are having is the age, then diastolic blood pressure, then poverty index, race, red blood cells, sedimentation rate, serum albumin, serum cholesterol, serum iron, serum magnesium, serum protein, sex symboling, blood pressure, TIBC, then white blood cells, then body mass index, and pulse pressure. So these are the features used in this data set. So out of these features, we have only uh, displayed the 5, any random 5 out of it. So these are the features we have, and you can actually look into the in your data set. When you load this data set, what goes into your training, you can check. For example, this is my specific record like 1.99. So this is a false, that is risk of having a risk is having a risk condition is false. Similarly, for the different records, you will have different condition. So I can here. Let's see how to check whether your data set has an some sort of missing data or not. Like what happened when you collect a very large set of data. So there might be a possibility that for the certain patient you don't have BMI information, but you have some rest of the other information. Some patient you don't have the diastolic blood pressure, but you have all the other like poverty index, RBCs, and all of the information is present. So certain column information might be missing uh, in some cases. Still, you should not directly remove those entries into your data set. Uh, you can use specific columns from your data set, and if most significant feature is most significant feature information is not available in your data set, so before training your data set you should directly completely eliminate it. So either you can completely eliminate it, that you can erase from your data set, or you can do feature amputation. So feature amputation is something where you have you keep all the other information or all the column values as it is, but certain column, for example, you have information about the gender. So in this context, the gender might not play that bigger role, or if that feature is not that significant. So you uh, can directly generate it from either of any class. Maybe you can take a male or female. So you can fill that information. from those missing values, or if your feature is a significant one, you can directly eliminate the eliminate that feature from your slide. So here we can see, I can have a heat map. So in all those features, we can see that my systolic BP has most missing values. So what I can do here is I can completely if my specific feature has most of the missing values, so it is as good as I don't have any information about that specific feature. So I can directly eliminate that specific feature. Or if my specific feature has a very limited amount of missing values, so I can eliminate those records instead of complete features. So how to uh, identify the null number? This is the isNull function used from the pandas data frame that you can directly use to get the index numbers of the null value from your data frame. So to run this slide, you have to first familiar yourself with the pandas data frame, some of the basic the sklearn function or sklearn library, some of the operations onto the your data frame, like how to do filtering, from how to locate the specific record from your data frame, or how to locate specific column or a specific feature vector from a data set. So you just play around the data frame later on, so that you can use this IPython notebook for the data exploration purpose as well as the model training purpose. So in data frame, like the from your training data set and validation and test, uh, those specific missing frames can be derived. So obviously, we don't want to include those data set into your model training. So you can drop it directly. So those rows can be whatever the identified rows in your data set can be dropped from your model training. Here, this is example of how decision tree can be trained with the help of sklearn library. So sklearn library has a decision tree function inbuilt where you need to provide these hyperparameter values. So the max depth, the random state. So here uh, uh, here we have keep max depth as a none, and we'll see what will be the effect onto your model, and then later on we can try different combination of this hyperparameter. So we'll try with a different value of hyperparameter 1, 2 or 3, how your model performance varies. So once your data is cleaned, so your training data, validation data, and a test data all have proper clean data, like no missing records, and all the on most of the significant features are present. All this comes under the data pre-processing. So once your data pre-processing is done, we move forward with the training part. So here you can use the sklearn decision tree classifier with the hyperparameter to train the model. So you simply have to, once your tree there is tree object is created, so this is the object of your decision tree classifier. You have to provide a data set to the this classifier. So that data set is training versus that is your X train, where you have all the features, and a Y train where you have the output, that is possibility of having a score, whether it's a true or a false. So this information is provided here. What you can have is if you want to purely go with the mathematical computation, so you, instead of false, you can provide the 0, and instead of 1, you can instead of true, you can provide 1 to your model, and can train it. So after your model has been trained, and we are just, so the random state is 10. It means your data set is shuffled with one specific sequence. Like here in this case, your you can observe this is your this is one random state. So in a state 10, your 1599 comes after 2794, in 1182 comes after 69, then followed by 6915. If you have a different random state, let's say random state 11, the shuffling will happen differently. So random state is given to retain the shuffling information. For example, if I have trained the model, then I change my shuffling with a different random state. Then again, I want to try out with my previously shuffled data sequence. I can use this random state information. So it's just to retain the randomness of your data. So certain sequence have a certain set of sequence have certain random state. So here I provided the random state, and the max depth value is given as a none, and we can calculate the training. So you can observe your training is really good. So training index is 1, but your validation index score is low. So this is like what you can say. This is your model is overfit. So this happened because you have not provide appropriate model depth. So it performing really work on really good in a training data set, but not that good in your validation data set. So what we can try out is different max depth. So let's say we'll have a max depth of 2, and let's train the model again. So here even if your training score is reduced, but your validation score improves. So the model is generalized well. But still it is not the optimal. So you can try out a different max depth and come up with the best possible value of this hyperparameter, which will give you overall good accuracy on the training set as well as the validation set. Here we can visualize how your decision tree model is actually taking decision and estimating the risk. So this is here I use a max depth 2 instead of max depth 2. If we can try the different max depth. You can have different training validation score, and again you can visualize it. So number of layers your decision tree goes through has also increased. So this is the way you can try out by yourself. You can play with the different hyperparameters. You can uh, do the data pre-processing. You can try out the feature reduction as well. Like many times it happens that your model have lots of features, but those all the features are not that relevant. So you can use feature reduction techniques like principal component analysis or linear discriminant analysis, where you can like from your possible or from your existing 10 features, you will have a most significant, let's say 3 or 5 features. Or you can eliminate randomly. You can drop out specific column from your training data, and check the validation and the training and validation accuracy. So from that also you will get an idea whether specific feature is relevant to or not. Similarly, instead of decision tree, we can use random forest as well. So the random forest, I will skip this time being. You can try out later on, and you can reach me at any time if you have any doubts in it. So we'll again move to the our slide, where we'll see what are the different models we can use for the treatment. So in medical treatment, as we see, we extract as we get some information from our diagnosis, and the prognosis and medical record has been generated. Like if we have a certain report, so we want to extract the information from those specific report, and possibly that report where maybe doctor has given the mode of the treatment on individual patient. So what we try to do is we try to estimate whether that specific if we follow those specific mode of treatment, whether that patient health is improved or not. So for that reason, we need to extract certain information from those medical records, and we have to estimate the quality of our estimation. Uh, Also, we can observe like what happens to a patient if they got a treatment, uh, and understand what would happen if they have not received the treatment. So what here there's a two important aspects. One is the extraction of the information, and another is the evaluation of your uh, estimation. Like example, you have estimated that a specific kind of in a specific kind of cell is present in your image or not. So if you provided with the image, and you have predicted specific presence of specific cell into your image or not, so on what basis you have come to a conclusion that specific cell is present or not. So this is known as interpreting your model. So model interpretation part, as well as extracting information from the medical record, uh, where we use natural language processing techniques, which is actually the RNN, which is a recurrent neural network, is used as a backend, where we extract the from the image of PDF, we convert into the text, and from the this text we try to identify the features. So those features like the age information and some other abnormalities and everything, so that from this unstructured data we can generate an structured data, so that from those structured data we can uh, uh, we can develop further models to estimate the effect of the treatment. So this is the first way. So mostly in extraction of the information from the medical record, we use NLP, natural language processing, where the recurrent neural network is used as a backbone.
Sir, unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, sir. May I ask some questions?
Unmute, sir.
Hello. Hello. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I guess I lost voice in between. So, what is the last thing you have heard? Can anyone please give me an idea?
Sir,
Like,
in PL model last slide.
okay, yeah. So, uh, is there any question?
Sir, I have some questions. Can I ask over here or at the end of the session, can I ask it?
You can ask me. I think we have already passed given time, so it's okay. You can ask me later on. I can provide my contact information here, so that anything is there we can discuss in detail. Uh, this is the uh, overview how we can use natural language processing techniques to extract the information from unstructured data set like medical records. So in a medical records where the diagnosis from the doctor is given into the report, and we extract the structural information. So here RNN, which is a recurrent neural network, is used as a backbone, and using that extracted information, we create an health record. So which is actually the structured data set, and that structured data set is further used to estimate the effect of treatment on individual patients. Another aspect is to estimate the quality or interpret your model prediction. So for example, if let's say I have identified the presence of, let's say, my in specific image of peripheral blood smear, if I identified the presence of neutrophil as in cell, so your deep learning model is generally looked as a black box, like where you provide as an input to it, and at the end it will give you an output to it. But on what basis or what from where it has seen features, or on basis of what features it is come up with the specific uh, prediction of whether having a neutrophil or a basophil or eosinophil. So this hidden whatever goes through those hidden layer can be interpret with the help of certain tools. So GradCam is one of the tool for the same, where we provide along with the model training, we provide guided back propagation to locate uh, the gradient information along with the heat map. So this is how your grad camp works. So I have one IPython notebooks where I have taken LISC data set, and from the LISC data set we can classify the presence of various cells, specifically lymphocyte, neutrophils, basophils, and all. And on what basis your model has interpreted is that is a basophil, and what basis your model has interpreted neutrophils and so on. So that can be interpreted. So it is very important in the medical scenario that if your deep learning model is coming with the certain diagnosis, so it, even though your model has a 98% accuracy and 2% maybe your false predictions, so those 2% is very critical because you are playing with the health or life of the patient. So what is expected in the computer vision model is that along with your model prediction, you should provide the model interpretation so that we can give weightage to your prediction that, yeah, so this particular model has predicted, and based on this region or due to these specific features or this specific information, so that we'll get confident about our output. So the model interpretation and uh, the extracting the information from the medical record to generate and structure data set is used in the once your structured data is used. Similarly, the we have used decision trees, or also have added the random forest, which is the machine learning classifier. So we can further estimate the effect of the treatment. So I think this is all that we have covered so far. I have not gone into the details of the how different machine learning models works, specifically in context with the uh, prognosis. But I think in tomorrow's session, we'll be covering different machine learning model like ensemble techniques like random forest and boosted trees, how they work, how from a structured data you can come up with the classification, and so that from the set of your input information, the expected output can be generated. So right now it is just an overview, but maybe as we have seen what are the different building blocks of the uh, convolution neural network. Similarly, we'll look important aspect of the some of the machine learning models. So how you have input data and what happens within your machine learning model. Some concepts like a bagging, boosting, we'll see in detail, so that from the input data, the class prediction, uh, the how class is predicted, and how to uh, basically evaluate your model on the basis of different matrices like confusion matrix and all. So for with this, I would like to end my presentation. I know that it's not possible to go into the details of everything or explaining the maths behind all the models, but the my idea was to give you a broad overview about the very important concept of it, and provide you some snippets and the reference links so that you can look into it by yourself and try out those different models and architecture with the some of the hands-on uh, code provided by me. So I will provide some of the IPython notebooks to you, basically Google Colab, so which you can directly load onto the Google Colab and test it out. So for with this, I think we can conclude today's session. Utkarsh, can I leave? Hello.
Thank
Uh,
you, Kalpesh, for providing very helpful information.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Very interactive.
So I know that it will be also to many of you because it's not possible to understand all the model for a diagnosis, prognosis, and a treatment in a session of 1.5 hour. So it needs it's a you might need a more than 1.5 year to understand all those aspects. But obviously, I think this will be a very good beginning point to all of you to look into the various aspects. I will provide you some of the courses as well, which will help you to learn those techniques. There's a really good courses on the Coursera, Udemy, and Udacity. So I will like to provide you those links as well, so that later on you can go through it and can start your journey of understanding and learning various deep learning and machine learning model. So with this, would like to thank you all of you to listening me very patiently, and thank you everyone, and thanks Utkarsh for providing me this opportunity to share this information with all of you. I hope this will be very helpful to you in the upcoming future.
If you can share your PPT and some of the study material, we will be happy for that.
Yeah, sure. I will share my slides, my IPython notebooks, where you can try out the code by yourself. And you can reach out to me on a LinkedIn or maybe on a WhatsApp, where would like to uh, explain you or if you have any further queries or want to explore more into this.
Sure, sure.
Okay, thank you, Utkarsh. Thank you for time. Thanks.
Okay, so all of you can